The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. In the year 2347, they finally got their answer. Park stood at the window of her small cabin aboard the diplomatic vessel Horizon. She was 42 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and tired eyes that had seen too many failed negotiations on Earth. But this was different. This was first contact with alien life. This was everything humanity had dreamed about. The ship carried a crew of 63 people: scientists, translators, security officers, and diplomats. Among them was a young communications officer named Lee, daughter of Admiral Lee, had volunteered for this mission against her father's wishes. She believed in peace. She believed that the galaxy would welcome humanity with open arms. She was wrong. The Horizon arrived at Nexus Prime, a massive space station that floated between three stars. It was the heart of the Galactic Council, a coalition of 12 alien species that had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, had studied everything Earth knew about them. The Dominion was the most powerful member. They were tall creatures with pale blue skin and 4 arms. They had conquered dozens of species and believed themselves superior to all other life forms. High Arbiter led the. He was ancient by human standards, over 300 years old. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed planets, and never once shown mercy to those he considered beneath him. When he looked at humans, he saw insects pretending to be equals. Entered the council chamber with her head held high. The room was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Representatives from all 12 species watched her with curious eyes. Some seemed friendly. Others looked at her like she was an animal in a zoo. She spoke clearly and without fear. She told them about Earth, about humanity's journey to the stars, about their hope for peaceful cooperation. She asked for nothing but a chance to prove themselves worthy of galactic society. Listened with a thin smile on his face. When finished, he rose from his seat. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Humans," he said slowly, tasting the word like something bitter. "You have existed for barely a moment in cosmic time. Your species still fights wars over lines drawn in dirt. You pollute your own world. You kill each other over the color of your skin or the gods you worship. And you come here asking to stand among us as equals." Did not flinch. "We do not claim to be perfect, High Arbiter. We only claim to be willing to learn and grow." Laughed. It was not a kind sound. "The Council offers you 2 choices. Accept Protectorate status under the Dominion, where you will be guided and controlled until you are ready for civilization, or refuse and be all galactic trade and travel rights. You will remain trapped in your little solar system forever." The chamber fell silent, looked around at the other species. Some avoided her eyes, others watched with pity. Only one, a silver-skinned female named from the consortium, met her gaze with something like respect. "I must consult with my government," said calmly. "We will give you our answer soon." Waved his hand dismissively. "Go then, little human. Run back to your masters." The Horizon departed Nexus Prime 2 hours later, sat in her cabin writing her report to Earth. She recommended refusing both options. Humanity would find another way. They always did. She never finished that report. 3 warships appeared from nowhere. They surrounded the Horizon and demanded it stop for a customs inspection. Captain, commander of the vessel, tried to comply. He opened communications. He followed every protocol. It did not matter. The soldiers boarded the ship with weapons drawn. They gathered the entire crew in the cargo bay. 63 humans knelt on the cold metal floor while officers walked among them, laughing and making jokes in their own language. Lee was near the front. She was scared, but she did not cry. She thought about her father. She hoped he would not blame himself for what was about to happen. The commander activated a recording device. He wanted the galaxy to see what happened to species that refused generosity. One by one, the humans were executed. Some begged. Some prayed. Some stood in silence and faced death with dignity. Park was the last to die. She looked directly into the recording device and spoke her final words. "Remember this," she said quietly. "Remember what they did here and make them pay." The commander laughed and pulled the trigger. The recording was broadcast across all of Council space. It was meant as a warning. It was meant to show other species what happened to those who most species watched in fear and reminded themselves to never anger their masters. But on Earth, a different reaction was taking place. Admiral Lee sat alone in his office. The recording played on his screen. He watched his daughter die. He watched Park's final words. He watched the laugh and celebrate their cruelty. For a long time he did not move. He did not cry. He simply sat there, his hands folded on his desk, his eyes fixed on the frozen image of his daughter's face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "You should not have done that." Across Earth, the United Earth Coalition convened in emergency session. Leaders from every nation gathered in a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. They watched the same recording. They heard the same laughter. And when the lights came on and they looked at each other, there was only one question on everyone's mind. What would humanity do now? Admiral Lee stood before them. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something ancient and terrible. Something that had forgotten existed in the galaxy. Something called vengeance. "They think we are weak," he said. "They think we will submit. They are wrong. I propose we show them exactly what humanity is capable of when we have nothing left to lose." The vote was unanimous. Earth went silent, and in that silence something terrible began to grow. 18 months passed. To the Galactic Council, it seemed like Earth had accepted its defeat. Human ships stopped appearing in neutral space. Human communications went dark. They celebrated their easy victory over another primitive species. High Arbiter often replayed the recording of the Horizon Massacre during his dinner parties. His guests would laugh at the terrified humans, mocking their tears and their prayers. Enjoyed pointing out the young female who had stared at the camera without crying. "That one had spirit," he would say. "Too bad her species was too weak to use it." But far away, beneath the surface of Earth, humanity was not weak. They were preparing. General stood in the command center of Bunker 7, located 3 kilometers below the mountains of Korea. Around her, thousands of workers moved like ants through tunnels that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Factories built ships. Scientists designed weapons. Soldiers trained day and night without rest. Was 51 years old. She had spent her entire life in the military, rising through the ranks during Earth's last Great War. She had seen the worst of what humans could do to each other, but she had also seen the best. She had seen people sacrifice everything for those they loved. That was the power they did not understand. She walked through the factory level, watching as workers assembled the warships. They were smaller than vessels but faster and more deadly. Earth's engineers had taken apart every piece of alien technology they could find and made it better. They built their ships for intimidation. Humanity built theirs for killing. Dr. Minyu met her at the weapons testing facility. He was a thin man with thick glasses and nervous hands. Before the massacre, he had been a peaceful scientist studying medicine. Now he designed tools of war. "The pulse bombs are ready," he said, adjusting his glasses. "One strike can disable an entire fleet for 6 hours, long enough for our ships to destroy them." Nodded, and the infiltration drones. "Tested and working. They can bypass any shield they use. They will not even know we are there until it is too late." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are doing important work, Doctor. Your family would be proud." Minyu's wife and daughter had been visiting the spaceport when the Horizon departed. They had wanted to wave goodbye to friends on the diplomatic team. 2 days after the massacre, Minyu received their ashes in a small box. They had destroyed the entire spaceport as a security measure. He did not sleep much anymore. On the other side of the planet, Captain Han prepared for the most dangerous mission of her life. She was 34 years old, with short hair and scars on her hands from years of combat. She led a team of 12 elite soldiers trained specifically for covert operations in alien space. Their mission was simple: map every major military installation. Their method was less simple. They would travel in stolen vessels, wearing stolen uniforms, speaking learned languages. If they were caught, they would be tortured and killed. There would be no rescue. "Questions?" asked her team as they gathered in the briefing room. A young soldier named raised his hand. "What if we are discovered?" "Then we die," said simply. "But we make sure our information reaches Earth first. That is all that matters. Our deaths mean nothing if the mission fails." The team nodded. They understood. They had all lost someone in the massacre or the attacks that followed. They had all volunteered knowing they would probably never come home. Looked at each of them. They think we are animals. They think we are afraid of death. We are going to show them that humans do not fear death. We welcome it if it means protecting our people. They departed that night. 6 months later, only 6 of them returned. But they brought with them detailed maps of 200 military bases, defense codes for 17 star systems, and the location of High Arbiter's personal estate. It was enough. Back at Nexus Prime, Counselor of the Consortium grew worried. Unlike the other council members, she had studied humanity carefully. She had read their history books, watched their entertainment, analyzed their psychology. What she found frightened her. She requested a private meeting with High Arbiter. "You should not have killed those humans," she said. Laughed. "Why, they were nothing, a minor species from a minor world." "You do not understand them," insisted. "I have studied their wars. They are not like other species. When threatened, they do not submit. They fight. They fight until there is nothing left to fight with, and then they find something else." Waved his hand dismissively. "They are emotional creatures. They will cry and shout and then forget. In a generation, they will beg to join our protectorate. And if you are wrong?" "I am never wrong." Left the meeting feeling cold. She began quietly moving her people away from space. She did not know what was coming, but she knew it would be terrible. Her instincts proved correct. 18 months after the massacre, Earth broke its silence. A single transmission was broadcast on every frequency across all of Council space. It reached every species, every world, every station. The voice belonged to Admiral Lee, but the words spoke for all of humanity. "You killed our people. Now we come for yours." High Arbiter received the message during his morning meal. He laughed so hard he nearly choked on his food. His advisors laughed with him. 300 human ships against the greatest military force in the galaxy. It was suicide. He ordered his fleet to intercept and destroy them. He wanted to broadcast their deaths just as he had broadcast the Horizon Massacre. It would be entertaining. His fleet departed that afternoon. 200 of the finest warships, commanded by his most experienced admirals. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. In the darkness between stars, humanity waited. 300 ships arranged in perfect formation. Every captain knew their role. Every soldier knew their duty. They had trained for this moment for 18 months. Some had been waiting their entire lives. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the flagship unyielding. He wore his dress uniform, the medals on his chest reflecting the light from distant stars. In his pocket, he carried a photograph of his daughter. "All ships report ready," his communications officer said. Looked at the tactical display. 200 warships approaching. They probably expected the humans to run or surrender. They did not understand that humanity had come to fight. "Open a channel to all ships," he said. His voice echoed across the fleet. "Remember why we are here. Remember the horizon. Remember our dead. Today we make them remember us." He paused, looking at the approaching enemy. "All ships attack." The darkness exploded with fire. Admiral's fleet died in less than 3 hours. The commanders had expected a primitive enemy using primitive tactics. They expected the humans to form defensive lines and try to protect their ships. That was how civilized species fought wars. But humanity did not fight like a civilized species. Dr. Minu's pulse bombs struck first. They appeared from nowhere, carried by drones so small they did not register on sensors. When they exploded, electromagnetic waves rippled through the enemy fleet. Shields failed. Weapons went dead. Navigation systems crashed. 200 of the galaxy's finest warships became floating coffins of metal and confusion. Then the human ships arrived. They did not maintain formation. They did not follow any tactical doctrine they had ever seen. Each human ship picked a target and attacked with everything it had. They used missiles, lasers, kinetic rounds, and when those ran out, they used themselves. 17 human captains deliberately crashed their ships into vessels, killing themselves and their crews to take the enemy down. They could not understand it. What species sacrificed itself so willingly? What kind of soldiers smiled as they died? Admiral Lee watched the battle from the bridge of the unyielding. His face showed no emotion as ships burned and broke apart. He felt no joy. He felt no satisfaction. He only felt a cold emptiness where his heart used to be. Enemy fleet destroyed, his tactical officer reported. We lost 47 ships. 47 ships, thousands of lives. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, all dead, but the mission was just beginning. Set course for space, ordered. We have work to do. The human fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed. They emerged at 12 different colony worlds simultaneously. It was a coordinated attack planned down to the second. They had no warning. One moment their skis were peaceful. The next, human ships were raining fire down upon them. General commanded the assault on Secondary, the second largest world in the Dominion. She led her troops personally, something generals never did. She walked through enemy fire without flinching, her rifle spitting death at any who stood in her way. Push forward, she shouted to her soldiers. Give them nothing, take everything. The soldiers broke and ran. They had never faced an enemy that fought with such fury. Human soldiers did not stop when wounded. They kept fighting until they could not move. Some crawled toward enemy positions with grenades in their hands, pulling the pins with their last breath. On the jungle world of IV, Lieutenant led her squad into the military academy. Intelligence said that High Arbiter's nephew was stationed there. He was young and arrogant, used to being treated like royalty because of his uncle's power. Found him hiding in a storage closet, surrounded by his personal guards. Her squad killed the guards in seconds. The nephew fell to his knees, begging for mercy. Please, he said, I am worth more alive. My uncle will pay anything for my return. Looked at him with disgust. Your uncle murdered my sister on the horizon. He laughed while she died. I had nothing to do with that. No, agreed. But you laughed too. We have recordings. You attended your uncle's parties and watched our people die for entertainment. The nephew's face went pale. What are you going to do to me? Smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. We are going to give you a chance your uncle never gave our people. You are going to stand trial for crimes against humanity. The whole galaxy will watch. And when you are found guilty, you will die knowing that your death means nothing compared to what is coming for the rest of your family. He was taken prisoner. The trial was broadcast across all of Council space. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Human prosecutors presented evidence of cruelty stretching back centuries, species that had been conquered and enslaved, worlds that had been destroyed for resources, billions of lives erased because they considered them inferior. Other species watched in stunned silence. They had always known they were cruel, but they had never spoken against them. They had been too afraid. Now they saw a species that was not afraid. They saw humans standing in judgment of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, and they began to wonder if perhaps they had been wrong to submit. Back in space, the war continued. Human forces did not occupy the worlds they captured. They destroyed military installations, freed slave populations, and moved on. They were not interested in building an empire. They were interested in revenge. High Arbiter received reports every hour, each one worse than the last. His colonies were falling. His fleets were burning. Species that had been loyal subjects for centuries were beginning to revolt. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are humans, primitives. They should not be able to defeat us." His advisors had no answers. They had never prepared for an enemy like this. They fought for power and territory. They could understand an enemy that did the same, but humans were not fighting for power. They were fighting for something else entirely. Revenge, honor, love for their dead. These were things they had forgotten long ago. 3 weeks after the first attack, the Dominion had lost 40% of its military capacity. Refugee ships filled with terrified citizens flooded into Council space. They brought stories of human soldiers who fought without rest, who showed no fear, who seemed almost happy to die if it meant taking with them. Counselor listened to these stories with a heavy heart. She had warned, she had begged him to see reason. Now it was too late. She looked at the tactical map showing human movements. Their fleet was heading toward Nexus Prime. They were coming for the Council itself. "What do they want?" asked a younger counselor, his voice shaking. Shook her head slowly. "I do not think they want anything we can give them. They want us to understand. They want us to feel what they felt when we allowed their people to die. They want us to know fear." "Can we negotiate?" "Perhaps, but first, we must survive what is coming." She began preparing her own message. Not a message of war or surrender, but something else. Something she hoped the humans would understand. An apology, a promise, a plea for mercy from a galaxy that had shown them none. She only hoped it would be enough. For the first time in 800 years, all 12 species of the Galactic Council gathered in the Great Chamber of Nexus Prime. The last time this had happened, the galaxy was facing a plague that threatened to kill billions. This time, they faced something far more terrifying. They faced humanity. High Arbiter entered the chamber with what remained of his dignity. His robes were still magnificent, his posture still proud, but everyone could see the fear in his eyes. His empire was crumbling. His fleets were destroyed. His nephew had been tried and executed by human courts, and the broadcast had been watched by trillions. He took his seat and looked around at his fellow counselors. Most avoided his gaze. A few looked at him with open contempt. They had bullied the galaxy for, and now the galaxy was watching their bully get beaten. "I call this council to order," said the speaker, an ancient creature from a species so old they had forgotten their original name. "We are here to discuss the human situation." "There is nothing to discuss," said immediately. "The humans have attacked sovereign territory. This is an act of war against the Council itself. I demand military intervention." Silence fell over the chamber. Then slowly, Counselor rose from her seat. "The Honorable High Arbiter forgets something important," she said, her voice calm and clear. "The attacked first." His face turned purple with rage. "Those were customs inspections, standard security procedures." "Those were executions," replied. 63 unarmed diplomats murdered in cold blood, women, scientists, young people barely out of childhood. You recorded their deaths and broadcast them for entertainment. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the chamber. The Horizon crew kneeling, the soldiers laughing, Ambassador Park speaking her final words. "Remember this, remember what they did here, and make them pay." Let the words hang in the air. "We all saw this recording. We all did nothing. We were afraid of these, so we allowed them to murder innocents. We are not innocent in this matter. None of us are." slammed his hand on his desk. "How dare you? The humans are primitives. They should have accepted their place." "Their place?" His voice grew cold. "What place is that? On their knees, in chains, dead in cargo bays while you laugh." Other counselors began to murmur. Species that had been silent for centuries found their voices, that had conquered, enslaved, and destroyed for 10,000 years. Everyone had suffered. Everyone had stories. Now, finally, someone was speaking them aloud. A counselor from the coalition stood. "My grandmother's species was enslaved by the 300 years ago. They worked in mines until they died. They called them animals." Another counselor rose. "My world was bombed because we refused to pay tribute. 12 million of my people died." One by one they spoke, story after story of cruelty. The chamber echoed with voices that had been silent too long, and through it all sat in stunned disbelief. He had never imagined that anyone would speak against him. He had never imagined that anyone would dare. Then the alarms began to sound. Every screen in the chamber flickered. The tactical display showed a massive fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel. 200 human warships surrounded Nexus Prime. Their weapons were charged and ready. The chamber erupted in panic. Counselors screamed. Guards rushed to protect their leaders, but there was nowhere to run. The humans had them surrounded. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. Admiral Lee stood before them, his uniform crisp, his face calm. He was an old man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Members of the Galactic Council, I am Admiral Lee of the United Earth Coalition." Found his voice. "You dare attack this station. This is the heart of galactic civilization. You are declaring war on every species in the galaxy." Looked at him with something like pity. "No, High Arbiter, I am not declaring war on the galaxy. I am ending a war that you started." He paused, letting his words sink in. 18 months ago, your soldiers murdered my daughter and 62 other innocent people. You broadcast their deaths and laughed. You expected us to submit. You expected us to be afraid." His voice grew harder. "You were wrong." He looked around the chamber at all the counselors. "We did not come here to conquer. We came here to teach a lesson that the galaxy has forgotten. Cruelty has consequences. When you attack the innocent fight back. When you take everything from someone, they have nothing left to lose." He pointed at, "They attacked us without provocation. They murdered our people for sport. We responded in kind. We destroyed their fleets. We burned their colonies. We executed their war criminals. This is justice." Screamed, "This is murder." "Yes," agreed quietly. "It is, just like what you did to my daughter. The only difference is that we had a reason." He looked back at the other counselors. "I am not interested in war with your species. We have no quarrel with thee or any of the others. We only came for but if you choose to stand with them, if you choose to defend their crimes, then you will share their fate." He held up a data pad. "We have identified thee of every species represented here. We know your military capabilities, your economic centers, your population distributions. We do not want to use this information, but we will if we must." The chamber was silent. No one moved, no one spoke. Counselor stepped forward. "Admiral Lee, I am counselor of the consortium. I tried to warn High Arbiter. I tried to tell him that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. He did not listen." She bowed her head. "I apologize on behalf of my people for our silence. We should have spoken against the long ago. We were afraid. That is not an excuse, only an explanation." She looked up at his hologram. "What do you want from us?" Was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to remember. I want you to remember what happens when you treat other species as less than yourselves. I want you to remember that every civilization, no matter how small or young, deserves respect. And I want you to remember that humans protect their own." He turned to, "High Arbiter will stand trial for crimes against humanity. The military will be dismantled. Their conquered territories will be freed. This is not negotiable. Opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. For the first time in his long life, he had nothing to say. Counselor looked around the chamber. I call for a vote, all in favor of the human terms. One by one, the counselors raised their hands. Even species that had been allies for centuries voted yes. They could see which way the wind was blowing. They knew that the old order was ending. Only did not vote. He sat in his chair, his four hands trembling, his eyes fixed on the human admiral who had destroyed everything he had built. The motion passes, announced. The council accepts humanity's terms. Nodded slowly. Then we are finished here. My ships will remain until is in custody. After that, we will return to our own space. His hologram began to fade, but he stopped and looked at, Counselor, thank you for speaking the truth today. Perhaps there is hope for this galaxy after all. Then he was gone. The chamber sat in stunned silence. The most powerful civilization in the galaxy had just surrendered to a species they had dismissed as primitive. The Dominion was finished. And humanity, the youngest species in Council space, had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Do not wake the humans. 1 year later, the galaxy had changed forever. High Arbiter stood in chains before a tribunal of 12 species. The trial had lasted 6 months. Witnesses had come from across the galaxy to testify against him. Former slaves showed their scars. Survivors of destroyed worlds told their stories. Children who had lost parents spoke of nightmares that never ended. When the verdict was read, no one was surprised. Guilty on all counts, crimes against sentient life, mass murder, enslavement, genocide. The sentence was death. His execution was broadcast across the galaxy, just as he had broadcast the deaths of the Horizon crew. But there was no laughter this time, no celebration, only a quiet acknowledgement that justice had finally been served. General watched the broadcast from her new office on Nexus Prime. She was now the first human to serve on the Galactic Security Committee. Her job was to ensure that no species would ever again have the power to bully others. It was difficult work, but she was good at difficult things. Her assistant knocked on the door. General, the delegation is here. Smiled, send them in. Counselor entered with 2 of her aides. In the year since the war, had become humanity's closest ally. She had worked tirelessly to rebuild trust between Earth and the other Council species. Some said she was trying to make up for her silence during the reign. Others said she simply recognized that the future belonged to those who chose the right side. General said warmly, I bring good news. The coalition has agreed to the new trade agreement. All 27 of their worlds will begin commerce with Earth next month. Excellent, replied. Our factories are already producing goods. The workers will be pleased to have new markets. They discussed business for another hour, trade routes, security arrangements, cultural exchange programs, the boring details of building a new galactic order, but it was good work, important work, the kind of work that would prevent another war. When left, sat alone in her office and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were going about their lives. They were no longer afraid of They were no longer afraid of being conquered or enslaved. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was truly free. And it was humanity that had set them free. On Earth, in a small house overlooking the sea, Admiral Lee sat in a wooden chair and watched the sunset. He had retired from military service immediately after the war. He had done what he needed to do. Now he was just an old man with too many memories. On the table beside him sat a photograph of his daughter. She was smiling in the picture, her hair blowing in the wind. She had been so excited about the diplomatic mission. She had believed so strongly in peace and cooperation. She had died for those beliefs. Picked up the photograph and held it gently. We did it, little one, he whispered. We made them remember, we made them pay. A tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away with a weathered hand. Captain Han visited him sometimes. She had lost half her team during the intelligence mission, and the guilt still weighed on her, but always welcomed her. They would sit together and watch the sea and talk about the people they had lost. "Do you regret it?" asked during one visit. "The war, all the killing, do you wish we had found another way?" Thought about the question for a long time. "I regret that it was necessary," he finally said. "I wish they had been different. I wish they had seen us as equals, but they did not. They saw us as prey, and prey that fights back is no longer prey." He looked at her with tired eyes. "We did terrible things, I know that. We killed soldiers who were just following orders. We destroyed cities full of civilians who had done nothing wrong. We became the monsters they accused us of being. But we also saved millions of lives. We freed species that had been enslaved for centuries. We showed the galaxy that the strong do not always win." He paused. "I do not know if that balances the scales. I do not know if anything can. But I know that I would do it all again to protect our people. That is what it means to be human. We love fiercely. We grieve deeply. And we fight for those we love until our last breath." On Nexus Prime, a memorial was built for the crew of the Horizon. It was paid for by 6 council species who contributed in secret, ashamed of their silence during the massacre. The memorial was a simple white stone pillar with 63 names carved into it. At the top was Ambassador Park. At the bottom was a single phrase: "Remember this." People came from across the galaxy to visit the memorial. Some came out of curiosity, wanting to see the place where history had changed. Others came to pay respects to the humans who had died. A few came to lay flowers and whisper apologies they had been too afraid to speak before. Counselor visited every year on the anniversary of the massacre. She would stand before the memorial and read each name aloud. It was her way of keeping a promise she had made to herself. She would never forget. She would never be silent again. Dr. Minu visited once. He stood before the memorial for an hour, not speaking, not moving. Then he placed a small photograph at the base of the pillar. It showed his wife and daughter smiling at the camera. He turned and walked away without looking back. He never returned to Nexus Prime. He retired to a quiet laboratory on Earth's moon, where he spent his remaining years developing medical technology. He saved millions of lives with his inventions, but he never forgot the lives he had helped end. Lieutenant became famous across the galaxy. She was the soldier who had captured Snefew, who had stood before him without fear and promised justice. Young beings of every species saw her as a hero. She received thousands of letters asking for advice, for inspiration, for guidance. She answered every single one. She told them that courage was not the absence of fear. It was doing what was right even when you were terrified. She told them that strength came from protecting others, not dominating them. She told them that every species, no matter how small or weak, had value. She became a teacher at the new Galactic Academy, where young beings from all species learned to work together. Her classes were always full. Her students adored her. And every year, on the anniversary of the war's end, she would gather them together and tell them the story of the Horizon. "Remember this," she would say, echoing Park's final words. "Remember what happens when we forget that every life has value. Remember the cost of cruelty. And remember that even the smallest species can change the galaxy when they fight for what is right." A new proverb spread across the galaxy, whispered in dozens of alien languages. Mothers told it to their children. Teachers taught it in schools. Leaders reminded their people of it when times grew hard. "Do not wake the humans. They fight as if they have nothing to lose, because when you take from them, they do not." Counselor recorded her observations for future generations. She wanted them to understand what had happened and why. "We thought humans were primitive because they were young. We thought they were weak because they were emotional. We were wrong. Humans do not fight for territory or resources. They do not fight for power or glory. They fight for each other. They fight for love. And that makes them the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known. She paused in her recording, looking out at the stars. But it also makes them the most beautiful, because in all my years across all the species I have encountered, I have never seen a people so willing to sacrifice everything for those they care about. That is not weakness. That is strength. That is humanity. The recording ended. It would be preserved for thousands of years, a testament to the day when a young species taught an ancient galaxy the true meaning of strength. And in a small house by the sea, an old admiral watched the sunset and remembered his daughter's smile. The war was over. The dead were at peace, and the galaxy would never forget the price of cruelty. Remember this. Remember them. Remember humanity.